What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017, getting into the week here. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phones when you call on in. And obviously the big story right now is President Trump's announcement about Afghanistan. And, of course, it's a new approach to Afghanistan. Actually, it's the same old approach, doing the same thing over and over again. Same thing they've been doing for the last 16 years and expecting a different outcome. But the poppy fields are safe, and that makes it okay. And Lindsey Graham is out there absolute giddy that we're going to have more war in Afghanistan. It's going to be good, you know. All right, you can go fight it then. Here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Here's your Dayglow orange jumpsuit. And along the way, Donald Trump was issuing a thinly veiled threat against Pakistan, saying that Pakistan is now the haven for ISIS and Al-Qaeda, which we know from past experience signals that the U.S. is going to be invading Pakistan very soon. And, of course, Pakistan is very nervous about this because they recognize the warning signs as well. And Trump is out there basically saying the difference between his approach to Afghanistan and that of his predecessors is we're not going to bother with all that nation-building nonsense again. We're just out there to kill the terrorists. So that's the excuse for U.S. invasions. There are terrorists there. We're going to go on in and bomb the place into rubble. We'll kill them all, let God sort them out, whatever it is. And not too surprisingly, Trump supporters, his base, are a little upset. When you look at the way that Trump had railed against the wars, and in particular Afghanistan, all during his campaign, and all of a sudden he's done an about-face. It's like there's been this quiet military coup that we don't know about, and the Pentagon is now running the country. Trump's up there just saying what he's being told to say. But at this point, since Trump entered office, he has escalated the wars in 6 countries. And now we're all wondering, whatever happened to America first? We're going to take a phone call here. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Do you play poker by any chance?
Yeah, not lately, but yes, I used to play a lot of poker. I played it when I worked on that Mississippi Steamboat as an entertainer.
Okay. If you had 16 losing hands, would you continue or would you just walk away from the table?
Probably if I had 16 losing hands, I'd be out of money and I wouldn't be able to stay at the table.
So what is this president doing?
He's basically, he's upping the ante, and he's going back in and he's hoping that the odds are going to shift in his favor. But we're not talking about poker where there's a certain degree of luck. And the idea that if you have 16 losing hands, you're guaranteed to win the next time, which, by the way, is a statistical fallacy. We're basically talking about an engineered, controlled military policy in a region that we've been in for 16 years, and it hasn't worked. And it didn't work for the Soviets, and it didn't work for the British. In fact, it hasn't worked for anybody since the days of Alexander the Great. And I think the real agenda here, no matter how much it costs in other people's money or other people's children, is for the U.S. to maintain the illusion that it's not losing in Afghanistan.
I would agree with that. Well, not only that, though, look at all the individuals that have died on both sides,
yes,
and all the civilians. You know, that's my biggest concern right there. And plus, where is the money going to come from? You cannot continue to print money.
Well, Trump has already assured us that there's $1 trillion worth of minerals inside Afghanistan, and we're going to pay for the war with all that. Of course, that's about as accurate as Bush's promise that the Iraq war was going to be paid for with Iraq's own oil, because that never happened. They're just borrowing more money and plunging this nation deeper and deeper into unpayable debt to fight a war that in the long run we cannot win. If we have not been able to get Afghanistan under control in 16 years, it is never going to happen, short of just nuking the place and turning it into a graveyard.
I would agree. And now I might know why Trump went bankrupt 4 times. So
Yeah, well, at least one of those cases, that appears to have actually been an engineered attack by organized crime against him. So it's a little more complicated than that. But yeah, he can be brash. That's one of the things people liked about him. But it definitely does not work in a president who's got war authority. It's charming on the campaign trail, dangerous in the Oval Office.
Right. Well, Michael, you take care, and God bless.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. And dealing with our little technical issues here. Story coming out of the LA Times, no less. No, Mr. President, Obama wasn't a nation builder in Afghanistan. So we're seeing the editorials already coming on out. Nobody is really happy with Trump's new Afghanistan policy, except, of course, the war profiteers. And they're basically calling him on some of the spurious claims he's made about the last 16 years in Afghanistan. And we know what Afghanistan was really all about: opium and oil pipeline rights of way. And it all goes back to the 1990s when this oil company consortium wanted a pipeline through Afghanistan, and they didn't want to pay for the pipeline right of way at the price the Taliban wanted. So they went before Congress and said, our low-cost option here is for you to regime change Afghanistan and put in a new government that will be more agreeable to the price we want to pay for the pipeline right of way. And one of the people who was in that oil company consortium was the representative of Unocal, Hamid Karzai. And if the name seems familiar, it's because following the invasion of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai was the installed U.S. puppet ruler of Afghanistan. The oil companies got their pipelines, the CIA got a new source of opium, and everybody went home happy, except, of course, for the Afghani people and all those U.S. kids who were stuck in Afghanistan dealing with the aftermath. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So, all in all, a lot of people are very nervous, especially Pakistan. And Junaid Ahmad of the Center of Global Dialogue and Paul Jay had an interview. It's being reported over in the Real News. It amounts to Trump threatening Pakistan. And Pakistan is already out there saying, no, you don't need to come on in here. We actually have a very secure border. We don't have terrorists in here. And Pakistan is saying they're going to actually start working on a deterrent to counter threats to its security, meaning the United States. And as a matter of fact, the United States has been giving Pakistan a little bit of foreign aid, and Pakistan just turned around and said it really, in the greater scheme of things, doesn't amount to anything. You can keep that too. You stay out of our country. And by the way, I would listen, because Pakistan does have nuclear weapons. It's getting really, really tight over there. I mean, for Donald Trump, he's got all these failed wars already. We can't point to any of these wars yet and say it's an unqualified victory. We're still mired in Iraq. We're still mired in Afghanistan. We're still mired in Libya, Yemen, still thrashing around in Syria, can't get into Iran. He's talking about going into North Korea, and now on top of that, he wants to add Pakistan to the link. Yeah, it's a world war. We're there. We're already there. Look at all the countries the U.S. is trying to attack and invade. Now, apparently, Donald Trump is having a massive campaign rally in Phoenix, Arizona. He's already campaigning for his second term, a little early. And, of course, Antifa is planning to interrupt his rally tonight, which I think would be a very reckless thing to do with that petition on the White House petition website, demanding Antifa be declared a terrorist group. And it's already gone over 200,000 signatures. That's twice as many as needed for a White House response. If they really mess up his rally tonight, yeah, Trump could turn around, just declare them a terrorist group. And by the way, the Bikers for Trump, the local chapter there, are going to be on the ground to try and sort of calm things down and keep it from getting out of hand. Okay, let's take another phone call. Auburn in Atlanta, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing good. I can hear you.
Good. I'm just going to take a stab in the dark at the future here based on what's happened just recently. Do you think there's any chance that the establishment Republicans might pull Trump aside and say, we'll give you your domestic policies if you give us our foreign policy and hold that over his head for the entire 4 years of this administration?
Well, at this point, I don't know if it's the Republican Party or the deep state or the military-industrial complex, but it's very obvious that Donald Trump is not turning out to be the president we all thought we voted for. Of course, nothing new with that. We thought Obama was going to be different. We thought Bush was going to be different. And very obviously, the occupant of that Oval Office really is not in a position to be able to change things. If they try and change things too much, they get removed one way or the other. And that may have been made very clear to Donald Trump. But he's fully on board with the war agenda right now. And most of them are still blocking his domestic policy as well. So I don't think a deal that sweeping has actually been made. They're still pushing back on his immigration policy. They're opposing him on his repeal of Obamacare.
I meant like if it comes back, if they come back and now they approve the health care, then it would look like, okay, well, we're giving you this because you went into Afghanistan for us. We'll see what the future turns up. But I'm just trying to figure out. I know Trump is not doing this of his own accord. I know that he's been co-opted, and domestically not. I think they give all the presidents what they want domestically, and I don't think they give any of the presidents what they want foreign policy-wise. I think they're told what to do foreign policy-wise.
Well, no, there are some presidents who get elected who are perfectly on board with the foreign policy. George W. Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush are two very good examples. They were all gung-ho for all these wars.
Well, yes, the Bushes are different. Yeah, they go back a long way. They're different, yes, sir.
Well, they're at the core of the narcocracy. They're all tangled up with that CIA gun and drug running out of Arkansas in the 1980s.
Agreed.
Okay?
Thank you very much, Michael.
All right, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. This monument smashing is just getting out of control. Apparently, the NAACP is now getting on board with this idea of removing the Stone Mountain, Georgia monument, which is just carved into the side of a mountain, and they're just going to scrape it on out. And apparently, criminal vandals destroyed a 225-year-old monument to Christopher Columbus in Baltimore early yesterday morning. It was the oldest still standing to the explorer, and it was built and sat on private property. It wasn't funded by tax dollars. There was just this very wealthy individual said, I'm going to build a monument to Christopher Columbus on my property, and it's been there for 225 years, and the leftists just went in and smashed it up with a sledgehammer. They even posted a YouTube video, of doing this. And again, this is all illegal. Monuments are protected by federal law, especially war memorials, veterans memorials. They're protected. You cannot vandalize them without going to jail here. Apparently, over at the University of Texas in Austin, they did a late-night removal of all their Confederate statues. It's provoked mixed response. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick criticized the overnight removal, while U.S. Senator Ted Cruz called the decision, the university's prerogative, which when you consider that Ted Cruz isn't a natural-born citizen, I guess he wouldn't care about U.S. history all that much. So we'll see what happens with that little argument. But the polls are continuing to show twice as many Americans think these monuments should remain where they are than believe they should be removed. It's 2-1. And frankly, I'm surprised they're getting that many people saying they should be removed. But on the other hand, you've got this corporate media is just on this full-time rant of white separatists, white supremacists, Nazis, plantation owners. I mean, they're really pushing this this stuff that all goes back 150 years ago. All of this happened before we were born. And they're trying to make it a big issue while they sneak World War III in on us, keep us divided against each other, so we can't stand up and say, no more wars. That includes Pakistan. But again, I want to reiterate something here. No white person alive today has ever owned a slave. No black person alive today has ever been forced to pick cotton. And you got to let that go because it's being used to turn you into somebody's ideological weapon. and it is getting out of control. And apparently somebody found a Craigslist ad for tonight's rally in Phoenix for Trump. It's another rent-a-mob operation. So, yeah, there's going to be violence. Article out of activistpost.com. From Charlottesville to Boston, America is falling apart at the seams. And, yes, it does seem to be doing that. We've got these race riots, which are being ginned up. They're paid for. They're not spontaneous expressions of grassroots hostility. They're bought and paid for. They're actors on both sides. On the black side, on the white side. They're paid to be there and act like animals. So the media can come on in and just grab that. Put it on the air and say, oh, look, we've got, everybody's, getting angry. Race riot. You better choose your side here. We're all going to demonize the white people. And it does feel like the country is starting to come apart. For this and various other reasons. Collapse of the infrastructure, too many wars, overstressed economy. I've been saying for a long time that I see a Soviet Union-style collapse in the future for the United States government. It almost feels like it's actually here. It's starting right now. And it's painful to watch, but I think it's in our best interest to see it happen. Take a deep breath, start a whole new country, things will calm down. I'm sure the rest of the world would breathe a sigh of relief if the warmongering United States federal government were to simply fall down, go boom, like the old Soviet Union. Boy, remember after the Soviet Union went away and the U.S. government didn't have an enemy and all of a sudden everything was calm and peaceful all over the planet? Except for the Pentagon, they were all hitting their heads against the granite, saying, how do we get a new Cold War? How do we get back into the wallets of the American people? If there's no war, there's no money. If there's no war, there's no promotion. So now they got their wars back. They're happy. They're happy over there. It's money for them, promotions for them. It's a good business if you don't have moral qualms about war itself. Now, getting on back to all this social unrest here, the New York Times came out with this very bizarre article talking about Charlottesville, and they're hammering the idea that these are the rise of neo-Nazis, okay, which, again, there's cross-purposes in the propaganda, because Antifa says they're anti-fascist. Actually, so were the Nazis, who were socialist, and socialist and fascist are the opposite ends of oppressive economic exploitation. But it sounds good on the media, so that's what they're doing. So this New York Times article, Daniel Gordis, in an op-ed, said Jews are safer in Israel than America because in America, Jewish kids aren't taught how to shoot other people with guns like they are in Israel. In other words, he's saying it's a good thing that in Israel, Jews are taught how to shoot Palestinians, and if they were taught how to shoot people here, they would be a lot safer in this country. Now, how they reconcile that with the New York Times' usual opposition to the Second Amendment, I don't know. But some of the stuff coming out of the corporate media is getting bizarre. It's like they fired so many people and they've got the dregs, the lowest priced talent, are now writing these op-eds and articles. And some of the stuff they come up with is just hard to believe that anybody actually put some thought in there. Maybe they've got a computer in there writing the news. We heard they were developing one. Maybe this is what we're getting. Maybe this is what we're getting. Computer-written news, and it doesn't really make all that much sense because AI is not as well developed as computer companies like to tell us. We're going to take a break for some commercials. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently, now that Steve Bannon is out of the White House and back at Breitbart, apparently there are rumors circulating that Jared Kushner may soon leave the White House as well. Apparently, Trump is getting a little bit angry at how brazen his family members are at trying to influence him. And, of course, I think a lot of observers are going to be glad that Kushner is going to be gone because he's wholly on board with Israel's agenda. He's definitely Israel's man inside the White House for the moment. Apparently, we're now seeing more pressure applied to McMaster to get him out. Even Sheldon Adelson wants him out. So, very dynamic environment there in the White House. A lot of turnover going on over there. Basically, from the outside, it looks like a White House in chaos. And we know that a lot of this is, again, that deep state pushback against Donald Trump, that narcocracy. They don't feel they can trust him, especially as so many of these other scandals are starting to bubble to the surface. They can't count on Trump to tamp them down and make them go away, the way Richard Nixon was able to count on Gerald Ford to make Watergate go away before its links to the Kennedy assassination exploded into the public view. So that's what's going on. Now, getting on back to the scandals. Apparently this investigation into the Awans is all of a sudden starting to expand. Now, you remember that Imran Awan was arrested at the airport trying to leave the country. And apparently his wife had left the country a little bit before that. And looking at all of the evidence, the stuff that had been thrown in the trash can, which is what got noticed by a neighbor who realized it was U.S. government property. Now FBI agents are saying that somebody inside the Congress or inside that political system knew that the Awans were going to be indicted and leaked it to them. Could have been somebody inside the grand jury, could have been one of the prosecutors. Maybe they just wanted them out of the country so they couldn't be talked to. When you have a prosecution that is dedicated to not prosecuting certain things, the best way to do it is to tell somebody, hey, you're about to be indicted, get on out. And apparently when they looked into the Awan's home, they had boxes out for packing, and they were definitely moving. They were leaving the country. And a lot of those financial fraud indictments that have come on down had to do with them trying to pull their money out of the country and launder it and get it over to Pakistan. So somebody told them they were about to be indicted and they hit the panic button. And now somebody else is panicking because they got caught, they're being indicted, and I'm sure at some point somebody's going to say, let's make a deal. But the issue really comes on down to Special Counsel Mueller and Attorney General Sessions. Are they going to actually do their job, or are they just as corrupt as former FBI Director James Comey and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, who just sat there looking at felony violations of Title 18 by Hillary Clinton and refused to do a thing about it? And again, I understand where their concern is. If I am correct about the true scale of all this espionage, and we're starting to see part of it, where the Awans have basically gotten into every computer in the House of Representatives. And they were selling this material to foreign governments. How high does it go? If it goes all the way to the former Secretary of State, that is a scandal that could, in fact, bring down the entire government. And that's why we have to keep asking. We have to keep pushing on that one. And just on the basis of being American citizens, we cannot tolerate a government that refuses to prosecute high-level criminals. We do not have a two-tiered society. There is no nobility in this country that is above sanction or reproach. In fact, at one point there was even an amendment to the Constitution saying there will be no titles of nobility. And it's echoed in other parts of the Constitution as well. We do not have a noble class. All are subject to the laws, except for some reason, Hillary Clinton. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I was watching the Fox News feed, and I just saw an interesting commercial. And it's from Starbucks. And as you know, Starbucks drew a tremendous amount of negative publicity by their commitment to hire refugees, especially down in San Diego, where the refugees are carrying something like 10 times the probability of drug-resistant tuberculosis. Apparently, Starbucks has had a change of heart because the commercial is talking about their new program of hiring military veterans, and they're saying they've already hired 10,000. And yes, that is a good thing. That is a good thing. And more than just talking about that, they're portraying the veterans in a very positive light about how they're good contributors, and so that's a good thing. Basically shows you that, to some extent, large corporations are still sensitive to public opinion. All right, we're going to take some phone calls here. Tom in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good day, Michael. You can hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, Michael. Yeah, first off, the Bolsheviks are not going to stop, and Soros. They're not going to stop, Michael, until they get what they want, if we don't stop them. Yeah, I want to talk about what's going on with the statues and all that, and Robert E. Lee. First, they're going to go after Christopher Columbus and Teddy Roosevelt. That's Roosevelt's going to be next to the Spanish-American War. They're going to go after Teddy Roosevelt and call him what kind of racist he was.
Oh, they went after him at the New York Museum of Natural History. They've already tried to take him down. They would have torn the statue down, but the security team, the security guards basically ringed it and kept him away.
Pretty soon the Hispanics are going to go after him, Teddy Roosevelt. But, Michael, I want you to know this. I want to give you a little historical facts, and I know you're very astute of all this. But, Michael, I want you know, when they talk about guerrilla warfare, the beginning of guerrilla warfare started with Nathan Bedford Forrest. And if it wasn't for Robert E. Lee being the Southern gentleman, supposedly he was, that war would have lasted another 10 years, and who knows what would have happened, because Nathan Bedford Forrest is the one that gave our United States military, which is now called guerrilla warfare tactics. That was because of Nathan Bedford Forrest.
Well, wait a minute. I'm sorry, but those kind of tactics go back to the American Revolution and the gentleman, the Swamp Fox, the real historical guy that the Mel Gibson character in Patriot is based on. Those are based on some real people, including Tavington. And I forget the real guy's name, except that his nickname was the Swamp Fox. So Nathan Bedford Forrest did use those tactics, but by no means did he invent them.
Well, okay, but I know he was like trying to get hit units like I believe it was 8 to 12 guys, and he told Robert E. Lee and I believe it was Davis. He told Davis that's if you let me fight this, because remember, according to history, in the archives of history, Nathan Bedford Forrest never lost the battle. They lost the war, but he never lost the battle.
Yes.
And it's like Stonewall Jackson. If Stonewall Jackson would have went up against Tecumseh Sherman even said he would probably surrender him on the battlefield, because Sherman didn't want to fight Jackson on the battlefield. And if you look at History Channel ran a great documentary about Tecumseh Sherman, William Tecumseh Sherman. And if you watch the end, I believe he died in 1875. And he had his Union troops coming to his house begging for money, and he would throw them a quarter and a coin in a can. And these guys were in rags, these Union soldiers. And they, at the end of his Tecumseh Sherman's life, he was so sad what happened to the Union men who fought for him, and he couldn't believe it. And another thing, Michael, that they're not talking about in the media at all is what Lincoln's paper said. If you look at Lincoln's papers 2 weeks before he got assassinated, it would blow the liberals' mind. Abraham Lincoln, what he wrote 2 weeks before, when he was wanted to send them all to Liberia and Monrovia, that would blow people's minds throughout the country. They never taught it in school because they were afraid, because they had to use Lincoln as the greatest emancipator. But Lincoln, if you look at his archivist papers, Michael, you'll see that Lincoln was totally, he wanted to change everything.
Yes.
If Booth doesn't shoot Lincoln, Lincoln was going to send them all back. Look at his paper. I looked at his paper. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It's all archived. It's in the archives in Washington. They do not want to talk about that. And Lincoln knew what had to happen. Unfortunately, he got murdered. Cold blood by Booth. It was the stupidest thing, actually, because they didn't know. Lincoln had a mindset what he was going to do. Yes. After the Civil War ended. And people never talk about that in the media. These Bolsheviks, they're such liars. It's unbelievable. But, I'll leave you with the thought of this, Michael. They're not going to stop unless the white right fights back and says enough is enough.
Tom. Okay, you got to take a deep breath and calm down and think about what you're going to say before you say it, because it gets sometimes a little difficult to understand what you're trying to get across here. I know that
I'm talking about money, Michael. I'm talking about money. I'm talking about the money. I'm talking about the money.
Oh, okay.
Because Soros is using money. Soros is using money against the American public. George Soros. People know it. They know it. Soros is all about money. Michael, these protesters are being paid $2,000, and they have this. They keep having this thing, resist, hate, resist, which Hillary Clinton had, which is a bunch of crap. the one they're the real haters. The one anyhow we hate, resist, hate, or something. I mean, it's unbelievable what these demo rats come up with. It's amazing to me, and people fall for it. But again, it's the money trail because it's all about who's paying for this.
It's all about money, and it's all about control. There was a line from one of the Godfather movies. I think it was like the third one, where they said, money is like a gun. Politics is knowing where to aim it and when to pull the trigger, or words to that effect. And I thought that was one of the most insightful lines. Anyway, listen, Tom.
Actually, right. Okay, Michael, a great show. Like I said, see how this is going to play out, but it's going to be interesting. At least Aparo got a pardon. That was good.
Who got a pardon?
Joe Aparo. Trump's going to pardon him.
We're hearing the rumor. It hasn't been confirmed yet. Tom, we're going to let you go and switch to Philip in Virginia. Aloha, Philip. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Hello.
Hey there. Yes, sir. Tom, he's one of my favorites. You forgot to mention he's drinking way too much coffee.
I think he had a little less coffee today, but he just. I know that he knows what he is trying to say, but he needs to realize that we don't, and sort of engineer his speech a little bit better.
Yeah. Anyway, getting back to the Awan brothers, we're seeing, it looks like what you talk about a lot, limited hangout there with the financial charges being leveled against them, and they're ignoring everything else. The limited hangout is the prosecution based on the financial aspect.
Yes.
And one of the things that bothers me about this situation here with them is, and Trump's recent comments regarding Pakistan. I'm not a TV buff, but there's a few things on that I've followed in the past. One of them was a miniseries called Last Resort. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, vaguely, yes.
Yeah, that's when Pakistan got nuked. We were over there doing some shady stuff with the SEALs, and the submarine refused to fire because they, got the orders and from a back channel archaic type system, and they were being set up basically, I guess, to nuke somebody and without justification.
Mm-hmm.
So, we know that they use television to telegraph a lot of stuff about what's going on. Or you remember the series Jericho?
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah. So it just what's the old saying? The heebie-jeebies it gives you when you hear about it.
Well, all these post-apocalyptic films and TV shows, and then of course you've this epic obsession with zombies that seems to have dominated TV for years now. And you have to understand, after a while, I mean, how many zombie shows can you do and still maintain your audience?
Really. One more thing I want to ask you about, getting back to Charlottesville, was it in the Vault 7 data dump that they finally admitted to the technology to be able to commandeer automobiles?
No, that I think that was in one of the CIA dumps, but I don't know that it was Vault 7. But it's been known that the technology exists for all of these cars that have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. They're all basically engineered where somebody can come in from the outside and take over the car, disable the safety systems. A lot of people are thinking that's how Michael Hastings was killed. Because he'd been out there, he was working on an expose of Hillary Clinton, and he told his friends he was being followed and he was worried about his life. And then all of a sudden, he's driving down this street and his car takes off at top speed and slams into a tree. And they're trying, horrible traffic accident. But a lot of people, he had one of those high-end cars that had all the bells and whistles, automatic parking. And if you've got automatic parking, then that means the computer can take over the steering wheel.
Well, I thought about that when you reported last week about the driver of the car there in Charlottesville, and he was on medication. And also you're reporting that the police were ordered not to arrest him immediately and all that stuff. And I just, it's plausible that, they could have hijacked his car and, accelerated into the crowd like that. But that's just another aspect, of this whole situation. These people, the deep state, they will stop at nothing. These people are psychotic. All they're about is their agenda. And like you mentioned before, they are so opposed to this president that the Republicans will literally lose the election and the control of the House in order to get rid of Trump and to thwart his agenda.
Well, we're beginning to understand there are not really two political parties in the Republicans and Democrats, and we had one of them just switch over anyway, so it's not that big a deal. It really is the haves, the wealthy, against the rest of us. And I think they're very much afraid right now that they're losing control over the general population. We're not believing the propaganda. We're not doing as we're told. And we're certainly not willing to throw any more of our babies onto the enemy bayonets at this particular point.
That's a great thing.
I agree.
All righty. Appreciate it, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to George in Texas. George, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike. Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing great.
The thing is, looking at what's going on in Charlottesville and what's going on in Boston, and you're hearing they're not reporting the news. There's even people getting acid and VCs thrown at them. It ain't crowds. It's just random hits in the park.
Yes.
And the thing is, I would like to know if you could put this poll on your website. I said, would you support Donald Trump using the National Defense Authorization Act, using the military to arrest Antifa and BLM in violent acts to sort of restore order? But, as far as with NDA, arrest them, yes, but still don't disappear them. I still like them to have their trials and due process.
Well, we don't need to go to the NDAA, and we don't need to worry about disappearing them because, the states can call out the National Guard, which are as close to military as you need for a circumstance like this. Only if it broke into open warfare on the streets of America would the regular military be allowed out there because of posse comitatus. The one exception to that being the Marines, of course.
Well, but but look at Virginia. The National Guard was in Charlottesville, and they were ordered to stand down. And Ferguson, they were ordered to stand down. So it's kind of like a big iffy.
Well, Trump has the authority that was the precedent was set during the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles. Trump can federalize the National Guard, put them under federal control.
I don't want to resort to, if things get so bad that the president has to use the National Defense Authorization Act to sort of put down this insurrection. I really don't want to see him go to that. I would like to see how your listeners would feel about that in a poll. Would you support the president if he had to use the National Defense Authorization Act to arrest Antifa and BLM to restore order and protect property and life?
Well, first of all, we have to find out, how Trump and his advisors see this as playing out, because right now, in the eyes of the American public, the Antifa and the Black Lives Matter are coming off looking like the villains here, and the conservatives are coming off looking good. And Trump may just figure that it's worth letting there continue to be a little bit more violence and let this group self-destruct in a public relations sense. And they are talking about more hired actors at Trump's rally in Phoenix, and he just arrived there in Air Force One. So everybody, again, politicians are going to take what's happening and say, how does this help my agenda? How does this harm my agenda? And if Trump sees this violence as helping his agenda, his image, the GOP, he may let it go on a little bit longer. And only if it gets really out of control and bloody would he then start cracking down. In the end, it's a jurisdictional issue. Somebody has to start asking these mayors, why they're ordering the police to stand down and not intervene in a violent confrontation. Because that First Amendment gives everyone the right to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. But once it turns violent, the First Amendment does not apply any longer. I'm sorry, the First Amendment does not cover taking a baseball bat and beating out the glass of a car.
Well, I have some good news. I did call my state representative and governor's office this morning.
Yes.
About the statues being removed at Texas A&M and University of Texas. And people are really pissed off, and it's like... And I found out from the state representative's office that by law these presidents are not allowed to remove those statues because they're put there by the alumni, and they serve the board of trustees, and there has to be something with the board of trustees and the governor. That means he solely couldn't take those statues down at night on his own accord. So they were breaking law.
Yeah, we're seeing that all over the country where people are exceeding their authority to get on board with this agenda. But again, we're at a time right now where it almost seems like the entire civil structure of our society just isn't paying attention to the laws anymore. And that's another reason to think that maybe we're on the cusp of an absolute real collapse of that U.S. central government. Anyway, George, got to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials coming up on the top of the hour, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And somebody just wrote on in and shared the name of the real-life character played by Mel Gibson in the movie The Patriot. And it's based on a real person. In the movie, his name is Benjamin Martin, but the guy's real name was Francis Marion. And he was known as the Swamp Fox because he operated out of the swamp, and they show that in the movie as well. And he was known for his brilliant guerrilla operations. And so that's that little bit of history there as well. Okay, now, apparently, the U.S. occupation of Syria is now official. Russia Today is reporting the U.S. commander of American forces in Iraq and Syria, Lieutenant General Stephen Townsend, is basically telling the Russians, this is where we are. And we're informing you, and I'm just saying we will defend ourselves if we feel threatened. So that's basically it. The United States has invaded and occupied Syria. Syria didn't want them there. Syria didn't grant them any permission to be there. The reasons for U.S. presence in Syria kept changing over time. So now it's another occupation. It's going to be a standoff. Be just like the Korean War. It's going to be sitting there for 60 years, glaring at each other. Now, supposedly, there's a report floating around that North Korea has been caught sending chemical weapons to Syria. And frankly, it feels flaky to me because it demonizes two of the targets that the U.S. needs to be demonized and basically provides a vector, if you will, for more false flag chemical weapons attacks on the Syrian people. Oh, Assad is gassing his own people at pick a town, any town. And even worse, Kim Jong-un gave him the chemical weapons, so now we can go after both of them. It's got that Saddam's nuke smell about it, if you ascertain my meaning here. Apparently, following the closure of the Sana'a International Airport in Yemen, it has exacerbated the problem of Yemenites unable to access medical treatment. They're not able to fly to medical facilities in other countries, even where these other countries are welcoming the victims of this war. They simply cannot get out there. And it's just another aspect of how Saudi Arabia, on behalf of the United States, is waging this multilateral war against Yemen because Yemen didn't want to be ruled by a U.S. puppet government. But now we're hearing that Saudi Arabia would like to find some way out of this because it's turning into another quagmire. The Yemenis are now able to attack Saudi facilities in Saudi Arabia. They got an ammo dump the other day. So it's a mess over there. What a mess the U.S. government has made of the entire world. Look at all the chaos everywhere. All the suffering, all the starvation, famine. Now, there's another story that came on out. This was in Times of Israel. All right, we're going to do this on the other side of the station break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. So over in the Times of Israel, they have this story. And there doesn't seem to be any other source for it. But, of course, it was picked up without question and carried all over the American corporate media. Iran warns it can make weapons-grade material in days if nuke deal scotched. And supposedly, according to the Times of Israel, that Iran's atomic chief warned that the Islamic Republic needs only 5 days to ramp up its uranium enrichment to 20%. And then goes on to say a level at which the material could be used for a nuclear weapon. No. Flat out, no. You need enrichment to 95% or higher before you will get a nuclear detonation. I think what they're doing is taking a story where Iran says we can start the uranium processing up again in a few days' time, and then they decided to tack on the end of it, oh, they're going to be making bombs. And, folks, let's be honest. We have been hearing from Israel for 30 years that Iran is just weeks away from a nuclear weapon and will use it on Israel. 30 years, and it hasn't happened. And it's not going to happen, because even if Iran had a nuclear weapon, they're not going to use it without a really, really, really good reason. The whole point of nuclear weapons is to convince other countries to leave you alone. It's called a deterrent. I have these really big bombs, but I'm not going to use them unless you invade my country, and then, yes, I'm going to start flinging them at you. That's the whole deal, to make the cost of invading my country more than any financial gain you will see out of it. Iran is not the warlike country. It's been over 200 years since they initiated a war of conquest against another country. U.S. can't make that claim. Israel certainly can't make that claim. They can't go 6 months without bombing and killing somebody. The reason Israel does not want Iran to have nuclear weapons is so that Israel can project power into Iran. Israel wants Iran smashed up into pieces, like they're starting to do with Iraq, with the new Kurdistan. The U.S. wants Iran to not have nuclear weapons to make it easier to invade them. Because remember, when General Wesley Clark blew the whistle on this foreign policy plan to conquer all of the world's resource-rich areas and lock them to the U.S. dollar, Iran was on that list. So Iran knows the U.S. is gunning for them, and they have as much right to defend their nation as anybody else on planet Earth. Meanwhile, the U.S. military is constructing a new base in Iraq's Kurdish region. They're going to start breaking Iraq up now. Little tiny pieces, easy to bully, easy to push around. But they're going to run into a little bit of friction here because apparently Turkish President Erdogan is out there saying Turkey is resolved to prevent any attempt to establish a Kurdish state in northern Syria. So already Turkey and the U.S. are at cross purposes because the U.S. plan for a new Kurdistan does involve Syria as well. Now up in Sweden, which is very liberal, but they're starting to respond to all this warmongering. They're increasing their military spending, and they're bringing back the draft because of Russian aggression. Boy, don't you ever get sick and tired of hearing that phrase here? Now, getting on over to Korea, 3 top U.S. military commanders issued a strong warning message to North Korea in a rare joint press announcement. This is Pacific Command Chief Admiral Harry Harris, Strategic Command Head General John Hyten, and Missile Defense Agency Director Lieutenant General Samuel Greaves. They held a press conference at a local U.S. Forces Korea base, and they came on out there wagging their fingers at North Korea saying, don't you do anything bad. North Korea, of course, came on back and said, we're not doing anything bad. The constant threat by the United States and the way the United States treated this country during the Korean War justify having a robust defensive weapons program. So nobody's budging an inch on any of that stuff. And North Korea is out there saying that their self-defensive nuclear deterrence is not on the bargaining table, and it never will be. Because North Korea can look around and see what happened to countries that have given up their weapons of mass destruction. Syria gave up their chemical weapons. U.S. is still in there. Iran signed the nuclear deal and complied with it. And still the U.S. is trying to find a way to get in there, to wreck the deal, to go back on in. So why would North Korea sit down at the bargaining table with the United States of America and concede anything to the United States of America, knowing that the United States of America's reputation right now is they're going to come and get you anyway? They're just trying to figure out a way to get you to disarm. We're going to do shout out now to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sort of rounding up on this tragedy over on the USS John S. McCain, they finally did find those missing 10 sailors, the remains of them in a flooded compartment below decks. So, which is kind of what everybody was expecting was going to be the result here. And it's a sad story. And again, we're seeing efforts by the Navy to try and save face. Meanwhile, North Korea has announced their latest missile, and they're saying it absolutely will get past all of the Navy's defenses. It flies at 11 miles an hour, 2 feet above the water, and it has a special radar transponder that makes it look like a supertanker. And they're convinced it will absolutely get past our latest generation warships. And based on the McCain and the Fitzgerald, it just might actually work. On a more serious note, a lot of military planners are becoming very, very concerned about the latest in Russian hypersonic missiles and how they are so fast and maneuverable, it's basically rendered obsolete the current U.S. naval defense doctrine. And it's called the Zircon, and it can reach a speed of Mach 10. That's little over 2 miles per second. Now, the Aegis system with the standard missile, its reaction time is about 8 to 10 seconds. And the Zircon will travel a distance of 15.5 miles in that period of time. Meaning the Aegis does not have enough time to detect and destroy it. And because the Zircon is maneuverable, the close-in weapon system, the phalanx gun, you know, the little R2-D2 shape with a Gatling gun on the bottom, is not going to be likely to hit it. Now, of course, the Navy is coming along with their new laser weapons, and they're starting to put them out on ships. But I've noticed something from all the test footage. There needs to be a lot of dwell time. That laser beam has to be kept on the target for several seconds before you start to see any damage. And in a military test, yeah, that's okay. But if you're talking about a maneuverable target that's swinging all over the sky and all over the water, keeping that laser beam on exactly the same spot on the target, that is going to be very, very hard, if not impossible. I think if we get into a shooting war with Russia and China, we are definitely in big, big, big trouble here. I think too many people in the Pentagon cling to this idea of the invincible American military, and it isn't. We lost in Vietnam to a clearly militarily inferior force. We never did win in Korea, and contrary to the movies and TV shows that you've seen growing up, we did not win World War I and World War II all by ourselves. We waited to see which side was going to win, and then we hopped on board. And our military, like our medical system, is the most expensive on earth. And it's not a very good quality at all. I think this war is going to be a big mistake. I think this country is going to lose it. Even if it goes nuclear, I think it's going to lose it. All right, getting on over to some foreign news. There's been another ramming incident. This is in France. Apparently, a man stole a van and then ran it into pedestrians at a bus station in Marseille, managed to get away, and then hit another bus station a few blocks away. And one death and several injuries. And apparently they've arrested the driver. Now, getting on to the economic news. Russia has just paid off the last of the Soviet Union debt. This was a payment of $152 million to Bosnia, clearing all of the outstanding Soviet debt. Russia's economy is doing very well. And they're certainly not sinking into this morass of debt like the United States is. And it's easy to understand. Russia is growing agricultural produce the rest of the world wants to buy. They're having a record bumper crop of wheat this year. And Russia makes things other countries want to buy from them. And the United States, because of World War II, because of Bretton Woods, our economic elites got lazy. Oh, manufacturing's for the third world nations. And then the GMO disaster. And that's why they're so desperate to try and regain hegemonic domination of the world's economy. Bring all of the world's banks into slavery under the Federal Reserve note, because without that, it's only a matter of time before it all comes apart. When was the last time you heard the United States paid off its debt? Andrew Jackson. And they tried to shoot him for it. Now, U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin paid a visit to Fort Knox. And it was just a visit. It's only the third time a U.S. Treasury Secretary has visited. And he basically told the audience, he said, I assume the gold is there. We don't need to count it. So I don't think he's done anything to assuage the concerns that maybe the gold is not all there. I mean, it hasn't been audited in 64 years. Now, back in the 70s, when we were starting to see the aftermath of Nixon's shock, and a lot of people were concerned about whether there was still gold in Fort Knox to be used as collateral for U.S. government borrowing, and they went in there with a TV crew and some guests, and they opened a door, and they showed a wall of gold bricks. But nobody was allowed to touch them. Nobody was allowed to go in there. Nobody was even allowed to see if there were more bricks behind or if it was just all stacked up in front of the door. We don't know. We do not know. And Mnuchin's assurances, I assume the gold is there. Well, we know what assume means, don't we? I noticed History Channel is rerunning those Book of Secrets programs again. So if you haven't seen the gold conspiracy, you might want to set your DVR to record that. Because a lot of the stuff that we talked about in that show, we recorded that thing about 4 years back now, and a lot of that has now been confirmed. Now, getting on over to Germany, Merkel is dealing with a big problem with their car industry. And partly it is because of all the scandals of these iconic German car brands that were caught rigging the emissions test. And it's been a huge, huge blow to the credibility of the car makers and their products. And sales have plunged. And they're starting to see more and more people are buying the Teslas. For environmental reasons, for status reasons, they're actually very cool-looking cars. And Tesla is now cutting into the German car market. Over at Ericsson, they're getting ready to let go 25,000 more people. They're dealing with their woes. Meanwhile, Germany, France, and Italy are basically trying to get the EU to create a system to block Chinese takeovers of major European companies that appear to be motivated by politics rather than economic goals. Now, this is kind of a slippery slope because how do you really know? I mean, obviously, if China comes in and it's buying a company that's losing money, you have to wonder if there's an ulterior motive. But if China comes in to buy a company that's profitable, you can't know if there's a political agenda at work or not. This smacks to me of the beginnings of protectionism and sort of Europe's answer to the threatened trade war by Trump against China. And apparently over in France, Macron's popularity has plummeted as he scrambles to please the European Union on France's deficit. And basically, it's the same thing. Austerity, 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 austerity. And it's a hard sell because the people of Europe and the people of America, all they've been hearing for years now is you must make do with less so the bankers can have more. And more people are coming to understand that the banking system is set up as a complex fraud. They're allowed to create money out of thin air and then loan it to you at interest. And you have to work to get enough of those pieces of paper and colored ink to pay them back. Debt is a system of enslavement. And Macron campaigned on getting away from the EU debt slavery. And instead, he's just gone right along with it. Merkel is facing serious criticism as she runs for re-election. The rising poverty in the German people, the rising inequality that is becoming very obvious, the refugee problem, with all the sex attacks and violence in the no-go zones. And it's hard to imagine that she could actually stand a chance of winning re-election. And as a matter of fact, one of her serious opponents is the German right-wing Alternative for Germany party, which is campaigning on a promise of sending back all newly arrived migrants. And say, place them in asylum centers while their applications are reviewed. Because Germany, in fact all of Europe, has a big problem in that the vast majority of the migrants do not qualify for refugee status. And that's an issue. Now, Angela Merkel is out there, again, campaigning, and she's campaigning to the German fishing industry, promising them that after Brexit, German fishing fleets will still have access to British waters. And the fishermen came on back and said, that's a complete fantasy. You cannot guarantee that. So Merkel is definitely in trouble. And the only thing that's going to get her reelected is massive election fraud. Now, here's an interesting story. You've often heard the old cliche about a criminal who turns to good. Apparently, there is a former mafia boss who has put together his own campaign, his own fleet of boats, to stop migrant boats from leaving Libya and getting to Italy. And apparently, this former mafia boss is responsible for the sudden drop in numbers over the past month. Because those migrants are afraid to go on out there. Now, somebody ran this story on what really happened, and I think we're going to go with it. It's not really timely. But it's a reminder, as we look at all these claims about North Korea's nuclear weapons and Syria's chemical weapons, that our government does lie to us. And then down the road, they'll clear their throat and say, well, yeah, we did here. And it has to do with the Oklahoma City bombing. And how there was a rush to judgment, truck full of ANFO, Timothy McVeigh and two others, and that was the official story, and anybody who had questions about what was going on was a tinfoil hat kook conspiracy theorist. Then 2 years after the bombing, we actually had CNN admitting that the Justice Department Inspector General's office had determined the FBI crime laboratory made scientifically unsound conclusions biased in favor of the prosecution. This is back at the same time that Frederick Whitehurst was making noise. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're just finishing up on this, and it's an important point to make. that we do deal with a government that will misrepresent things to us for political gain. So we're talking about the Oklahoma City bombing. The official story was a truck full of ANFO, and everybody who was talking about additional explosives inside the building itself, oh, they're just a bunch of kooks and tinfoil hat wearing wackos. And then 2 years later, they come on out and say that, yeah, actually the FBI crime laboratory on which this entire claim of a single truck of ANFO had been based really was not being very diligent about the job. They were making claims they could not support, and they erred about the size of the blast, the amount of explosives, and the type of explosives used in the bombing. Remember, there was a U.S. government weapons expert, General Benjamin Parton, came on out and said there is no way an entire truck full of ANFO could have done that damage. And the media kept enlarging. Oh, it was, 500 pounds of ANFO. No, it was 1,000. It was 2,000. It was 4,000. And they were citing amounts of ANFO you couldn't have fit into the truck. And basically, it was all fake science. And you need to keep that in mind, because as we come up on apparently the ramp up to a new war or a ramp up to a new civil war, you're going to be told things by the corporate media that just flat out are not going to be true. And you need to be aware that you are being lied to so that you can remain objective and analytical. We're going to take some phone calls now. Let's go to Yvonne in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, aloha, Mike. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Am I coming in? Good. I had a question, comment about the coverage on the media of that Friday 11th supposed Nazi candlelight march. The pundits on every station, including Fox, they were saying, even crying over a comment where they said they chanted JEWS, Jews will not replace us, but I thought they said YOU will not replace us. So I typed in both on YouTube to see, what was what. And I noticed that all of the video where it said Jews will not replace us came from the media, and the one came from CNN where their lips were not moving, but you heard Jews will not replace us, but it was definitely a voiceover. Later on in the video, they cried White Lives Matter, and the lips were moving, so that audio was in sync with the video. And then when I typed in YOU, video from, Antifa people that didn't like the supposed Nazis, they put it up. It was their own video. It was footage that they took. But they weren't claiming that the chant was Jew. They claimed that it was you. And I don't know, did you notice that? And then I went on Stormfront, Rents Radio. I tried to listen to David Duke and Stormfront to see what they were saying. They seem to be owning it. They seem to be acting like, oh, yeah, that's what they chanted, Jews. But I don't... I
haven't seen the tapes, but on the other hand, I would not put it past CNN to pull that stunt, because we've seen them do things like that before, change the wording on interviews to change the meaning. We've caught them doing it more times than I care to count, and yes, it does sound exactly like what CNN would do, and it's unfortunate that some people like David Duke fell for it, or maybe they are just operating on the assumption that most people fell for it, and they're just going to have to deal with that reality.
Yeah. I made a mistake. I don't think it was David Duke that owned it. I think it was Stormfront where they were acting. But yeah, I think you're right.
I don't pay any attention to them. Yeah.
Yeah. But I just wanted to get some, from the other side, opinion. I don't know. I just wanted to see what they were up to. So
I definitely want to pat you on the head for doing what you did, and that's what everybody should be doing. Think, oh, they're screaming about this. Take a closer look and make sure that it can be confirmed, because we live in an age of lies. We're the most lied to people on the face of planet Earth. And the sooner you realize that and develop the appropriate defenses to being lied to by government and the corporate media, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah. People, because the people that I know, that scared them when they heard that that's what they were chanting. And,
that's what they're hoping. Oh, they'll be afraid and they'll stop thinking. Fear is what gets in the way of thinking, and that's why the lies get more and more shocking over time. Yvonne, we're going to have to let you go. We've got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Ramsey in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. I have a question. You mentioned about 10 minutes ago that the Russia paid its last debts or something like that. Can you elaborate more about that?
Russia just paid off the last of the debts from the old Soviet Union.
And what's that about?
Sorry?
What's that about? Like I'm not following.
I didn't say it was bad. It was just part of the economic news here, and the point I made is that obviously the Russian economy is doing very well because they were able to pay off the debts from the old former Soviet Union, and they're doing very well. Contrast that with the United States, which is hopelessly mired in this artificially created debt from the private central bank, and is never going to be able to find a way out unless they go on out and simply bomb everybody we owe money to.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to switch over to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yo, Rick, or Mike.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw a review on that Tesla. They took it from San Francisco to Vegas, but it took them 2.5 hours to fill up in Barstow.
Yes.
That thing is it's a glorified golf cart. I think the company will completely be smashed. Next item I have on the agenda.
Well, before you move on there, let me respond to what you said here because first of all, I mean the Teslas I've seen, we've got a few of them on the island, look really, really good, and apparently there's already a new system that's coming online for a much more rapid recharge that will allow a complete recharge in about 5 minutes, which is not much longer than it takes to gas up a conventional car. And so once they get that out there and it's starting to propagate across the country, then all of a sudden it becomes viable. I mean, if you look at the early history of the automobile, the automobile owners, they had to find hardware stores that carried gasoline and fill their cars there. The idea of a gas station took a long time to develop, and it took a very long time for gas stations to become ubiquitous in every town.
Well, okay, Mike, that's maybe true, but you just remember that electricity that you're going to pump into that car is going to be mighty expensive when you get to Barstow. Now, as far as like the American military goes, I think for the most part, unless we're ready to take casualties, we're nothing but a paper tiger. I mean, North Korea doesn't even, I don't even think they have nukes, but they have missiles that can sink aircraft carriers. So if we're not going to take casualties, which we won't because it's too politically of a hot potato, there ain't going to be any wars. It's just talk. We've been hearing it for years with Iran. I just don't see.
Yeah, but look at all the.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Look at all the wars that the U.S. has already engaged in, going all the way back to Afghanistan. We've been in Afghanistan having people killed.
These are wars with people that don't shoot back. These people don't shoot back. Some of these people in Afghanistan never see themselves in a mirror. I mean, so you want to fight somebody that's going to shoot back? I just don't see that ever happening.
Well,
I mean, we're running into. We've had two battleships just stopped by accidentally running into other ships. I don't know.
That's not.
I wouldn't be worried about a big war.
Well, I'm worried about a big war that we're going to lose. Is really what I'm worried about here. And the fact of the matter is that yes, the U.S. government likes to pick on nations that can't really fight back, but they do fight back, and a lot of people do get killed. And right now, the current estimate is that the United States government, since the end of World War II, has murdered anywhere between 20 and 30 million human beings in all of these various interventions around the world. So people are being killed, and so are Americans. We saw a lot of.
I'm not saying we're not killing people. We're killing people that can't fight back. I mean, look at you take these countries like South Viet or the Vietnam War, where we didn't win that war.
Yeah, we lost it, and we lost 60,000 Americans.
Same thing in Korea. I mean, so we can't go into wars because people that shoot back. I don't think we're going to get involved with. Okay,
we've already gone to war with countries where the people could shoot back, like Iraq, and we're still stuck in there.
You know what? I know people that went in there. They said these people just dropped their weapons and ran. A lot of these deaths were just logistical from too many people around equipment. And there were some IEDs, but for the most part, they just dropped their weapons and ran. You go try that in Iran, and you're going to have tens of thousands of casualties, or Korea, or Russia.
Well, I certainly hope you're right. I certainly hope you're right. Unfortunately, the people who are planning these wars, they don't care how many casualties there are. Yeah, as long as they think that they can get the country to go along with them with a big enough bluff, a big enough false flag, that's what they're going to do. Whether it's Woodrow Wilson lying about the Lusitania not smuggling weapons, or Franklin Roosevelt lying about Pearl Harbor being a surprise, or torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, 9/11, and on and on and on. The people who want the war will do anything to get it. They've obviously co-opted the president, who ran on an anti-war platform. For that matter, so did Obama. And they're going to get it any way that they can. And they're unconcerned with how many people are going to be killed at either end, on either side, rather.
Yeah. I think over in Afghanistan, it's basically a babysitting job for the TAPI pipeline, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistani, India pipeline. And what we have here is just people that are causing them trouble building the pipeline. This isn't a war over there. This is a babysitting job for big companies that are have construction projects. So, anyhow, thanks for taking my call.
All right. Well, obviously, I disagree with you on that one. Let's switch to Tony in Puerto Rico. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Listen, I'm really upset with Donald Trump and Afghanistan. I know he has a lot of real estate properties up and down the East Coast. I'm starting to believe the guy's mopped up, man, because why he wants to continue the war in Afghanistan for the poppy field? I really think he's really mopped up. What do you think?
Well, there has to be an explanation, and of course, it does look like Trump is now under the control of the generals, as it were, and they're probably telling him they got to preserve that pipeline route of way. They probably told him
the poppies.
I don't know that they told Trump about the poppies. I don't think Trump would really be comfortable with that. But certainly there's the idea that there's $1 trillion worth of minerals in those eastern mountains. Certainly the idea that the U.S. cannot be seen to lose any war at all along this path toward global conquest, as it were. And Trump may have just gone along with it for whatever reason.
Okay, Mike, thank you.
All right, we're going to let you go. I'm getting a whole bunch of emails from people who are verifying what the caller said, that in point of fact, the video, the people that were chanting, "You will not replace us," and that the CNN version where they say Jews will not replace us is another corporate media hoax. All right, let's take another phone call. James in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I wanted to know if you know about, like, that, what they said about the reason why we're really going to go into Afghanistan, about that $1 trillion worth of resources that's there. That's why we're going to stay there.
Well, no, what Trump was out there saying is that the American people don't have to worry about paying for this next war because we're going to pay for it with Afghanistan's mineral wealth. But then Bush made the same promise about how we weren't going to pay for the Iraq war because we were going to use Iraq's oil to pay for that. And that never happened. Yeah. We still see war and defense spending being the largest single line items in the federal budget year after year, and they keep going up, and our debt keeps increasing with it.
Yep, it's all about the money for the defense contracts. It's just like that rocket attack on the air base. Those rockets were just the rockets alone, not counting, maneuvering the ships and everything. That was like a little, like $95 million. I mean, and I think it's the same thing with these statues. In the South, when you really look at it, the reason that they're tearing it down is, I guess you could say, it really wasn't about slavery. It was about money.
Yes.
Because a poor man in the North could not make. You couldn't make any money when you have labor in the South that's for free. It's just the same thing like China. Workers here can't compete. Why would you, as a company, bother to pay American workers a good wage plus health care and stuff? Why? When you can go to China, pay 10 cents, 25 cents.
Okay, James, for some reason your call keeps getting muffled, like the microphone is slipping away from your mouth. Could you maybe cozy up to that thing a little bit? Yeah, okay.
Hello?
Much better.
Okay. I don't know what's going on there, but I was basically getting to the money on why, I guess you could say, it is about money and about taxes, because the poor people in the North couldn't compete with the work in the South. It's free. And it's just like, you know, today with China, how the workers here, they can't compete. And it's funny how Donald Trump got the South getting all mad at Mexico when the biggest trading partner of the South during the Civil War was Mexico. They were getting the South cotton, and through Brownsville, right, and then the northern port right across it, called Baghdad, Mexico. They were shipping it there, and they were shipping out on Mexican ships with Mexican flags. And a lot of also Mexican boys were in the first battle, were in all the major battles, because they were Texas. They were Texas units. So a lot of Texas units were made up of Mexican boys in all the major battles. And that's another sad thing, because Texas was trying to put all the monuments of all the Texas units that were there to Texas. The only reason that the South lost when they cut off Louisiana, they tried to cut off it in Texas, the supplies, but we pushed them back 2 times. And they cut off the supplies in Louisiana, and that's what ultimately, you know, destroyed the South.
Yeah, once the Union had taken control of the Mississippi River, that was the main transport system for the South. And once they couldn't use those riverboats anymore, things pretty much ground to a halt there. Anyway, James, we're going to let you go here, and we're going to switch to Al in Canada. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. You know, all this talk about war and all this nonsense. I'd rather talk about something that's a little more positive. The Tesla car, for instance. You were mentioning about the 5-minute battery charge. Well, I don't know whether that, you know, what will happen in the very, very near future, because it sounds to me like, you know, those kind of fast charges are likely to blow up a battery or two, given, you know, the recent history of these lithium batteries.
Well, you know, they're talking about a new type of battery and a new type of charger. I'll tell you what would be a really good solution, and that is that the batteries are all identical and standard, and you pull into a refueling station, they simply swap a new battery for the one that's in there, already fully charged, and you go. And I think people would be willing.
You read my mind.
Yeah.
I was just getting to that, because even up here in Canada, I can't remember how many charging stations there are, but there aren't very many. And a lot of people think, you know, well, this is great. Well, how long does it take to charge these batteries? You can fill up your gas tank in about 10 minutes, but it's not going to take 10 minutes to charge a battery. So the obvious solution is to have these batteries actually mounted, I would think, like underneath the car, like where the trunk would be, or something along those lines. And just exactly what you said. You just replace the battery with another one and continue on your way. You're in and out 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I mean, that would be the way to go, because the slower you charge a battery, the longer that battery will last.
As a general rule of thumb, yes, but the battery technology is really starting to evolve. And again, they're looking for a solution to make these things to be refueled as quickly as a gasoline car. Now, it's a great thing when you've got all these charging stations, and we have them around here on Oahu, and it's great, and you'll see the little cars are plugged into them. And right now, the drivers of the electric cars love it because it's free. They're not being asked to pay for the electricity. But that's not going to last forever. I mean, they're putting it out there to help spur the technology on and get more people using electric vehicles, and then it's going to reach a point where they're going to say, all right, now we're going to charge you for the electricity going into your car. And that will transition it. Now, me personally, if I could afford it, I would be looking at least at a hybrid, if not an all-electric car. Because of those issues of environment. But the reality is, here on Oahu, that electricity going into the electric car is still being produced by an oil-fired generating station.
Yes. What we need are these stations that are strictly solar-powered and or wind-powered, and that's it.
Okay,
that would be perfect. I mean, I would love that. That's
okay. Our phone connection is breaking up. So I'm going to let you go here, and I'm sorry about that. Boy, we got a lot of callers here. Let's go to Cliff in FEMA Region 3. And Cliff, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Can you hear me?
I hear you fine.
Hey, long-time listener. It's the first time I've called. I'd like to share an observation with you and your listeners. I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people talk about the mainstream media. and how they really don't believe it. And for a lot of us, we haven't believed it in a long time. But people now are really starting to take notice. And things that are obvious to people that they just don't believe it anymore. But the thing that strikes me is that they seem to feel that they're in the minority and that most people are believing it. But everyone I talk to, they don't believe it. And I think that it's not enough to just put down the media and point out where they're wrong. I think when they dictate the talking points and they keep us talking about what they want us to talk about, that they're still in control and that they're only relevant if we're talking about them. Much like the currency, it only matters if it means something to us. So I really feel like, and Trump is included in this, he takes the talking points that the media puts at him, and instead of talking about the things that are really important, like the vaccine damage to our children and the economy, what it's doing to people on the street, the wars of aggression and all the other things, the lopsided influence that these special interest groups have over our politicians, so many of these things are swept under the carpet because the mainstream media just doesn't address them. So I just wanted to make that comment that, we have more power than we think we have, and we really shouldn't allow the mainstream media to always dictate the narrative of what we're talking about.
Well, I agree with you, which is why I don't even call them the mainstream media anymore. I call them the corporate media versus we in the independent media. And, we're addressing the deceptions of the corporate media for a very real practical reason, which is that there is still a segment of the general population who believes it. But we do drive our own... we've kept a lot of focus on the vaccine problem, a lot of focus on the GMO. We talk about a lot of stuff the corporate media doesn't dare go near, like the massive election fraud. And so, we are setting pretty much our own agenda in terms of what we think is the American people need to be hearing right now. Anyway, thank you for the phone call. We got to let you go, and we'll be back with more phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the telephones. Angel in Illinois. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Yes, the other day, somebody called up and you said that Britain, was having financial trouble, so they needed the World War II. And I've seen something on the Civil War, which we're being browbeaten on, at the Smithsonian a while back here. And it says, in what way was Britain, this at Smithsonian, says, in what way was Britain invested or really tied up in the war? At the beginning of the war, cotton impacted the livelihoods of 1 in 5 Englishmen. Everyone was worried that the cotton embargo would destroy Britain's financial might, but it turned out there was a huge cotton glut in 1860. There was too much cotton in England in warehouses, and it was bringing down the price of finished goods. So what the war did was rescue Britain from a serious industrial slump. And that was about to take place. For the first 18 months of the war, British merchants just used up the cotton that they had stored. Then finally, when it got really scarce and more valuable, truly, truly scarce, midway through the war, there were other sources of cotton, including coming from India and Egypt. By then, Britain had become completely invested in the war because the war, because of the war, the economy, guns, cannons, rifles, bullets, uniforms, and steel plating of all kinds, engines, everything that a war needs, Britain was able to export to the north and to the south. In fact, Britain's economy grew during the Civil War. So just from a financial point of view, Britain was heavily invested. And then the people from Britain came over here to fight in it, too, and keep it going as long as they could. You'll generally find that throughout history that those who are supplying the war materials want the wars to just go on forever and ever and ever. Vietnam is a classic example. Bombing empty fields, taking ground, then retreating, then retaking, then retreating. It was all about grinding up munitions, using up material, and taxing the American people to buy more of it. And the war business can be very profitable, but it's not good for the nation as a whole. Well, they sold us the slaves, and then now they're browbeating us still now over these slaves. And they came. This was all started because they were going to go down, and all of us killed each other. And at the slaves they sold us, they says, hey, you're a racist now. So anyway, I just thought I'd pass that along. It's at the Smithsonian. What part did Britain play in the Civil War? And it was like, hey, they're the king of it. No one even ever thinks about that one.
Well, they were a participant, but so were a lot of other countries, including Russia. And most of the European countries wanted the Confederacy to win because of Abraham Lincoln's use of a government-issued currency, which even back then, 150 years ago, was a threat to the private central banking scam. Anyway, Angel, we're going to let you go. We're coming up here on the top of the hour. Sorry?
See ya.
See ya. Okay. We're coming up here on the top of the hour, and I'm going to push the rest of the calls into hour number 3. Interestingly enough, and again, this is a story coming out of Ynet News, Israel is set to become a major exporter of medical cannabis. It's big business here. And anyone care to bet that all of a sudden Attorney General Sessions backs off his anti-marijuana crusade? We'll be back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And before we get back to the phone calls, a very troubling article just came on in. And this is coming out of Zero Hedge. Apparently, the latest round of sanctions against Russia, China, and North Korea from the Trump White House have provoked a very angry response from Beijing. Now, China diplomatically normally has what they call a cool-down period, where they simply do not respond to anything said by another government for a certain period of time, so everybody can take a deep breath and carefully consider what they're going to do. This time they didn't. They fired back immediately in very strong language, saying that the U.S. provocation, the U.S. has to immediately correct its mistake of sanctioning Chinese firms over North Korea. And basically China is saying they're going to escalate, and even saying that the diplomatic option may be out of the picture, and that is a very serious situation. See, here on the island of Oahu, we're not really afraid of Kim Jong-un's nuclear missiles. Even if they can hit where they're aiming at, his nuclear weapons, the largest one they've tested so far, would rattle the glass here if it hit Pearl Harbor, but that would be it. But the standard Chinese warhead, because their missiles aren't that accurate, their standard nuclear warhead would basically wipe out this entire island in the blink of an eye. And then people wonder why I'm not getting sleep at night. All right, we're going to go back to the phones here. Laura in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Last night on Rents, Tex Mars said that Afghanistan had 300,000 Chinese working, mining those rare minerals right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I got wondering, did Trump send, is he sending in troops? Did he make a deal with Xi to protect the Chinese that are working in Afghanistan? I hadn't even heard about that.
Well,
300,000.
Trump may be sending in the troops to kick the Chinese out.
We'll be a little more clear on that, huh?
Well, I mean, the goal is U.S. control of all of these resources so that they're traded only for the U.S. dollar. Now, I don't know, if China is already inside Afghanistan mining those minerals, then my guess is they're going to hit the world market for the yuan. And so that may be the reason for the escalation in Afghanistan, is going on in and regaining control of those resources, which is going to put us as close to conflict with China as any of us care to be.
Right, right. Can I give you a prediction?
Yes.
Did you have a story on that young man that the deep state or FBI, whoever was trying to recruit? He was schizophrenic, and he hadn't driven. They gave him a van, and they wanted him to go blow up a bank in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So my prediction is they're obviously fishing for a patsy right now.
Oh, they're always fishing for patsies. They're always fishing for a patsy. They want to have a whole supply of them ready to go whenever they're needed.
Right. So my prediction is they're going to have somebody blow up something, and they're going to blame it on the white nationalists or whatever.
Yes.
You know? You watch, that's what's going to happen real quick. Because they're obviously, you're right, they're looking right now. And they almost got this guy, but the guy's mother thwarted the attempt and she exposed it.
Yeah.
You haven't heard anything more about that?
No, just that there's a lawsuit involved. Anyway, listen, Laura, we're going to let you go. Terry in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, back since we're talking about Oklahoma City, back when that happened, the New American Magazine had a story about the FBI interrogating this guy in prison who they thought might have been John Doe number 2.
Yes.
And the next day, the prison called the guy's family and said he committed suicide in the cell. And if they were pressuring him to do a cremation, they said they'd pay for it. And this guy's brother evidently was a lawyer or something. He said no, and he had his own autopsy done, and this guy was beat up so bad that could have been the cause of death. And it seems to me the FBI is trying to rival the CIA in their despicable deeds they do.
Well, you know, they both tend to do the despicable deeds, and of course, Hollywood's part of Hollywood's job is to convince you that FBI and CIA agents, or for that matter, NSA, are just really swell Boy Scouts who only have the best interests of the nation at heart, and some of them probably do. Certainly, Edward Snowden has shown us that some of these people working for the spook shops do have a conscience and a sense of moral right and wrong. But we do know, and again, going back to COINTELPRO, the FBI likes to have some people on its payroll that are willing to do the dirty deeds that need to be done occasionally. Same thing for the CIA. The regular rank and file working in the office, the analysts and everything, they're probably very nice people. But for the, I think they call it the point of the spear, yeah, they like to have people who are willing to go on out and do these sorts of things.
Okay, Mike, thanks. I just one thought, though, on something else. The $1 trillion worth of minerals in Afghanistan, that's about enough to pay for our deficit for about a year and a half. Just a thought, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, and the way the Pentagon spends money, $1 trillion isn't going to put a dent in that. I mean, we're still trying to figure out where that more than $6 trillion vanished to, with a T. Okay, Nico, first of all, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And then we're going to go to Nico in California. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Speaking of that $6 trillion that the Pentagon lost, there's also another couple of trillion that I guess was announced lost the night before 9/11. I think, did something like that go down?
Yeah, that was Donald Rumsfeld got up there at the Pentagon briefing room and announced that the Pentagon had mislaid something like $2.3 trillion, and it should have been the economic scandal of the year, but fortunately for Donald Rumsfeld, the next day 9/11 happened, and one of the airplanes, the airplane that hit the Pentagon, actually flew around the Pentagon and hit the building right at the offices of the auditors who were trying to find out where all that money went. So somebody got away with several $1 trillion, and the number that they're using today is basically the sum of all these admissions, because there'd been an earlier admission that there was a $1 trillion hole in the Pentagon budget, then Donald Trump Rumsfeld's 2.3, and then there was another one after that. So you total them all up, and it's somewhere between $6 and $7 trillion with a T has gone missing.
Yeah, well, a trillion here, a trillion there, doesn't matter.
Soon you're talking some real money.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason I called was because I had heard, and perhaps you could elucidate, that there might have been some on-the-ground reports from citizens in Charlottesville saying that they saw buses pull up with Antifa and neo-Nazi-looking people all piling out of the same buses. Did you hear anything about that?
Yeah, we did. We reported on it yesterday, and a lot of people were saying exactly the same thing. And again, they're finding all these ads from the public relations firms that are hiring people. Apparently, they're offering $60 for 4.5 hours work in Phoenix tonight. It's all staged. It's theater, is exactly what it is.
Did you put articles up on that? Because I had someone I wanted to send that to.
I did yesterday. You might have to scroll down to page 2. But if you just do a web search for KKK and Black Lives Matter on same bus Charlottesville, you'll probably get it.
And you mentioned that you had, it was on the Goddard show. You mentioned that you saw something coming in Louisiana as well.
Shreveport. They're already running.
And did you post?
They're already running ads for the Shreveport. Yes.
Is there any source on that too? I'm kind of wanting to spread some of that with source.
Yeah, it was in the Craigslist for that part of the country. You go to Craigslist and you look under events and gigs, the places where actors go to get non-union extra jobs and things like that, and you'll find that kind of stuff. You go to work with a search engine, you'll find it, okay?
Hey, mahalo, Mike. I wanted to call back later today. I had a environmental, quote-unquote, global warming question for you.
Well, we're in our last hour, so why don't you ask it now, because we're trying to limit people to one call per day.
I'll make this quick, Mike. A friend of mine's an oceanographer and swears that the damage to the reef's getting bleached out, has to do with the oceans warming up, and that's the only reason it can happen. Is there a reason besides global warming and theoretical volcanoes that the ocean waters could be warming?
Obviously solar energy and the geothermal are going to be the primary controls of warming in the oceans, and we ran a story about 2 weeks ago where they've just discovered, previously unknown, a group of 91 volcanoes at the bottom of the Arctic ocean. We don't know how many of them are active, but in point of fact, the corals are being bleached by runoff from the shore. Fertilizers from commercial farming, toxic runoff from various factories, all of that stuff can kill the coral polyps, and of course the polyps are what give the coral their color. And so your friend out there, he may be a great oceanographer, but in point of fact, the corals are very sensitive to environmental pollutants, and that really is pretty much the cause of the bleaching. Because if you go places where there's a lot of pollutants, the coral is bleached on out, and if you go someplace where the pollution hasn't gotten there yet, the corals are gorgeous. And I can pick two examples right off the top of my head. Barbados, when I was down in Barbados, our little hotel was right on the edge of the beach, and the jet skiers were out there, and the ski boats, and everybody's got the, all the oil leaking out of their craft and everything, and the corals were basically dead. And then there was the other time when Claire and I did Fiji by tall ship, and we got away from the main island to the outer islands, and we went snorkeling there, and the water was clean, and the air was clean, and we were under sail, so we were not polluting ourselves, because we were under wind power, and the corals were just gorgeous, just the most beautiful you could ever imagine.
Perfect. Mike, mahalo. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, and we're going to switch over to Antonio in Chicago. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
Just my topic is immigration. I'm the guy who called you about 3 weeks ago. I'm originally from Chile. I just want to let you know that even though I'm an immigrant, I am with you with this immigration in Europe and here in the USA. Here in Chicago, you see it all the time. It's completely out of control. And I remember when I first got to this country, I was 18 years old. And the first thing I did was join the military, join the Navy, because I'm sure you know Chile is a long country with a lot of ocean. So I love the ocean. So yes. I want to join the best Navy in the world. And I think I did the honorable thing. I got my honorable discharge. And I'm sick and tired of all these immigrants just think they come here and get all the benefits for free. It just doesn't work that way. But that's all I got, Mike.
Okay, well, obviously this is being set up to lure people from one country to the other, to basically blur us all together. And this all goes back to the New World Order, global government, and George Soros. And one of the reasons there is currently so much turmoil in Europe is because a lot of these migrants didn't qualify as refugees. They were lured to Europe with promises of free stuff, cars, jobs, all the rest of it. They get in there, and it's not what they were told, and so they start acting out, and that's what's leading to all this hostility and friction in the streets of Europe. But to people like Soros, he doesn't really care. He just has that dream of his at the end where all of the races of planet Earth are blended together in one common crowd with no clear sense of regional, cultural, ethnic identity, to make them easy to control. That's what Soros and his people are after.
All right. Well, they're doing the same in Chile. Actually, it was we're like a 50 million country, and now we have like 3 or 4 million just in 2 years. And you're absolutely right. The culture is completely gone. We have all these people from different places saying they just don't want to be part of the country. They don't even want to speak Spanish, you know. So yeah, I know exactly what Americans are feeling because it's going on in every place in the world that I know.
Yes, it is, and you know, the problem is when you're playing with the entire planet and you make a miscalculation, you can cause some serious damage. Whether it's the wrong side winning the world war, or instead of having a one world government, you literally fragment the entire planet into regional warlords that just slaughter each other for generation after generation. Anyway, Antonio, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open. And let's go on and talk about some of the cool things here in the world of computers. Apparently, Mark Forged has come out with 2 3D printers that can produce items as strong as steel. And they're not metal scintillants. And no, I don't know if this would also be usable for firearm. But apparently they're creating objects, 3D printing objects that are infused with carbon fiber. And they're using a filament printing system, and they can produce items that are stronger than steel objects, like tools, wrenches, things like that. Now, the bad news is these are very expensive devices. I think the X3 is $30,000 and the X5 is $60,000. But 3D printing is getting to be really, really cool technology. And you just got to come up with something that you've got to make with it that you're going to be able to sell and, you know, start a business with here. So we've got all these interesting technologies out there. We just have to move forward. I think the caller the other day really did hit it on the head. We have another lost generation because we have people who are sitting here realizing they do not see any possibility of a better future. They do not see any possibility that by working hard that their lives are going to get any better. We saw the same thing happen around World War I. With the Bohemians, World War II, the Beatniks, the lost generation after Vietnam. War will do that. You spend your entire life watching a civilization be built around you, and all of a sudden it gets blown apart because the world leaders can't settle their differences. You can develop an attitude of, why should I bother? I'm just going to coast along. Just going to have fun, coast along, because there's nothing I can do that will make the situation better. And that is a malaise that is probably one of the biggest threats to our country right now. But it's very, very hard to inspire young people to work for a better life when their own life experience is saying that somebody's going to take that away from you. The scammers will take it away from you. The bankers will take it away from you. The war will take it away from you. Anyway, as you know, social media, the big corporate social media, has started to get very big brotherish. And somebody was commenting the other day that you look at all these things like Google and Facebook, and they were all these small startups. These were the independent guys standing up in defiance of big corporate media, and now they're acting just like the big corporate media, engaged in filtering, censorship. And apparently Google, on the other hand, has responded to public pressure and restored the accounts of statistics professor Salil Mehta, who's an adjunct professor at Columbia in Georgetown, teaches probability and data science, and whose work has appeared on websites all over, had been banned on Friday by Google, with all of his accounts basically invisible and no longer accessible. And it wasn't really clear what Salil did to provoke Google. And then apparently after his story went viral on the independent media, Google turned it all back on. Still no explanation of why he was banned. but it is a large amount of power to have in the hands of private corporations who are basically have a grip on what has become an essential means of communication for the people of planet Earth. And I do think that they should be regulated as a utility for the benefit of the public. And that includes application of free speech rights under the First Amendment. We're going to take a break here for a couple of commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And in a case of perfect timing during the break here, Fox News is running this story about the increasing use of robots in the U.S. economy. And, of course, the justification for it is that they need to find a way to compete with low-cost overseas labor, which I realize is an issue. My concern has always been that if you are replacing human workers with robots, you're also putting a potential customer for your product out of a job. Well, apparently, according to this story, they're not just replacing people with robots. They're setting up manufacturing teams that consist of robots and humans. And between 2010 and 2016, 184,000 industrial robots were added to America's production line, and at the same time, to go with them, 800,000 manufacturing jobs. So that's actually a good way to be going, and it's a good way to have a partnership where you have people working with the robots as opposed to the robot-only factories. All right, let's grab ourselves a phone call. Ahmed in Turkey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mr. Rivero.
Yes.
I wanted to speak about President Trump. Did anybody think that when he was chosen, the ruling class would say, we got our man there, we got you, we are happy? All this shenanigan about that media doesn't like him, it's all game. I would like to make a prediction.
Okay.
Trump is going to be president for the second term as well. All the Trump lovers can enjoy themselves. But if it's possible, I would like to say in our famous comedian language, who President Trump is. President Trump is a agreement with small print. They throw it on the ground while the nation bent over to read it, what it is. They position themselves behind you, unzip their pants, and they do what they do best.
Well, that's rather graphic, and I think it's also overly simplistic. I don't think that Donald Trump was the darling of the power structure. It was very obvious they wanted Hillary, and I think the opposition to Donald Trump within the White House itself, within the corporate media, is very real.
He does everything ruling class wants. He continues with the wars. He does everything they want. Why would they want to change it?
Because he's not doing it willingly and enthusiastically, and he represents a political ideology that is a direct threat to the globalist, liberal New World Order. Because regardless of what Donald Trump is actually doing, he still represents that image of a strong sovereign nation that is not being integrated to the rest of the world. And even with his going along with all the war policy, it's still we're the United States and we're going to be exerting our power. He's not talking about bringing these countries into a global community of any kind. And again, I think there is a concern that if certain really bad scandals were to surface, they cannot rely on President Trump to keep them under wraps, the way that Gerald Ford protected Richard Nixon during Watergate.
I hope we both live to see it. I'm saying they're going to keep him and they love him, and he's going to be chosen there for the second term as well. Of course, if we all live to see it.
Yeah, that's a concern right now. That is very much a concern. All right, well, listen, Ahmed, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to get back to the news here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. I don't know about you. I'm getting a little bit fed up with some of the arrogant attitudes of corporations who are now out there, instead of courting you and trying to persuade you and sell you things, they're literally out there saying, look, this is the way it's going to be. And Sonos has come on out there. It's a home sound system maker, and they want to collect data, and basically they're telling people who bought their system that they must accept the privacy policy, meaning no privacy, or the devices will simply stop working. That's a little too arrogant. We'll be right back with more phone calls. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go back to the telephones. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. I'd like to suggest that Jeff Sessions' anti-marijuana emphasis is very much in keeping with the idea of an Israel that dominates the market and keeps the prices up by keeping the possession of marijuana criminalized. So it could well be, that his emphasis, maybe that was even whispered in his ear by proponents of Israel, because they don't, keeping a criminal from growing it, keeps Israel to be the dominant supplier.
Yeah.
Jeff Sessions of the asset forfeiture seizure laws, which which tempts the police to criminality and keeps the Americans under the boot and kind of keeps the nation weak and divided.
Yes.
So it seems to me that Sessions' agenda is not exactly putting America first or favoring Americans' freedom.
No, he's there to preserve the status quo. He's there to keep the money flowing from us and to them. I mean, that's basically what it is. It's an oligarchy.
Yep. And if the marijuana were decriminalized, the price would go down. So,
well, now,
anyway,
Israel wants to be an exporter of legal cannabis. So the game plan here would be to block the development of a domestic cannabis industry,
right.
And then all of a sudden, at the point where it is decriminalized at the federal level, Israel's already out there saying, well, we're ready to import product to your store right now. Why do you want to even bother setting up a factory or a field or anything like that? Yeah, and basically they get in on the ground floor.
At the very least, yes. Actually, I also had one semantic suggestion. We're hearing all this talk of white nationalists, white supremacists versus, trying to say white patriots. I would suggest the possible use of a new term that would be used for white people who want to convey the notion that A, all lives matter, and that B, it's okay to be white, but certainly not be misconstrued as white supremacists. So how about the term white equitarians? They got the equitable, idea of equitable and equality in there. White equitarians. We don't want to dominate. We don't want to be supreme. We just want to, affirm that all lives matter and that it's okay to be white.
Well, I think you want egalitarian versus equitarian, because otherwise everyone's going to say, all right, where's the horse? But I think...
No, that's equestrian, not
okay. No, but I know that's what it means, but I'm saying the problem is if you start using words like that, you're going to sow more confusion than anything. So I understand where you're going with that, and it's a good concept, but I think it needs to have language that is going to play to all levels of our society, to put it gently. And here I am showing my my cognitive privilege again, but I think the idea is sound. The wording needs some tinkering.
Well, the problem with egalitarian is it means equal, and equal rights under the law, certainly.
Yes.
But we don't want to have anybody stretching it to the notion of financial equality, which will demand socialism. So,
yeah, that's ultimately...
all right, Mike.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to let you go.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. No, ultimately, all this demand for financial equality, that's exactly where it's going. It's socialist. It's communist. Doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter what your education is, you're all going to be paid exactly the same to prove that you are all equal. And again, it's communism when you start talking about that. All righty, let's take another phone call. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I'm going back and forth with a friend of mine. He was ex-law enforcement, and he is suggesting, whether he heard it from someplace in mainstream media or not, that it's possible that the Russians hacked the radar on this last ship collision, and that's why they had the accident. I have not heard that. Have you heard that?
I've been hearing all kinds of excuses as to why this collision happened that try and take the blame away from the command crew. We heard exactly the same thing back when the USS Fitzgerald got hit by that Philippine cargo ship, and the official Navy investigation is now over, and apparently they found the command crew at fault and have relieved them of duty. And so everyone's talking about jamming the radar and doing this and doing that. And first of all, why would Russia do something like that and provoke the situation? Second, ships have lookouts on them. If you've ever been on one of those Arleigh Burke, they got these really fabulous binoculars up on the top. They're mounted on these swivel stands. They're gorgeous optics. And you can see a very long way with them. And they have night vision, and they have all these other sensor systems up there that are usually all operating, or should be all operating, when you are in a crowded shipping channel. Now, GPS is great for maintaining your course and speed when you're out there in the open ocean, but when you're in a harbor, when you're dealing with other traffic around you, you're not relying on the radar and the GPS, you rely on the Mark I eyeball. And somebody made a goof. And again, looking at the damage to the McCain, it looks to me like they thought they were going to be able to cross in front of this oncoming ship, and they misjudged it. And they got hit right in the middle there. And again, it was dumb. And I understand that the Navy is now forming a grand commission to look at what's going on here. They may discover that years of political correctness have resulted in ships' officers who are PC liberal snowflakes and not really very good sailors. I want to share an impression I got the last time I got to go out on an Arleigh Burke, and I'm not going to name the ship and I'm not going to name the crew because I don't want to defame them, but I remember seeing the captain and his officers, and they reminded me of branch managers of some franchise store. It was a long way away from Horatio Hornblower or anything like that. And I think the lack of merit-based promotion may be taking its toll because, again, I have family who are in the Navy, and they're always telling me stories about how promotions are being given on political grounds rather than on merit. Oh, we have to have somebody here who's this and that and the rest of it. There's obviously a problem with incompetence in the handling of these very expensive ocean platforms. We've had 4 of these accidents now in a little over a year, and there is a problem, and it's time you have to face up to it. It's not the Chinese, it's not the Russians, it's not the solar eclipse, it's not all that other stuff. These crews are just getting reckless with these ships, and they don't understand the international rules of right-of-way.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Michael. That's actually what I said to him, and that the backup failed. The actual eyeball on the water watching with the goggles, with the binoculars failed. And no, this is not jamming radars, and Russia's not trying to escalate anything. They're trying to do just the opposite. They're not war hungry. But it would make a great excuse if you were to push for war. If the United States is pushing for war and they want to use an excuse and lie to us again as they have been in the past, well, this will make a great excuse, and they jammed our radars.
Well, yeah, somebody's trying to save their career in the Navy, and it isn't going to work. And by the way, if you've ever actually been out there on the ocean in a traffic area, you will understand just how big and impossible to miss these super tankers and super cargo ships actually are. And at nighttime, they are brilliantly lit up. They want you to know they are there. They're not like a warship that's going to be sneaky and in the dark and everything. They want you to know that they are there. They got flashing lights all over them. They are impossible to miss. The crew.
I agree.
The
I've
crew,
seen them come into San Francisco Bay. They are huge. They're lit up. You're right.
Yeah, they are. That crew knew that ship was there. They were trying to cut in front of it to show how butch they were, and they miscalculated. And I would be interested to see if there are going to be other reports of near misses by U.S. warships that are messing around with the right-of-way. And I can understand from the captain's point of view, he doesn't want to cross behind the super tanker because that stern wake is really going to rock your ship around. Even something the size of an Arleigh Burke is going to get shaken up. But that's the way the rules are written. And again, it's the usual thing. Oh, we goofed up. We have to find somebody to blame.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, one last quick question. Are these ships, these military ships, do they have some kind of video to, like the police officer, like a dash cam, but something on a ship to say, so if they tell us something, they can back it up with some video showing footage? They have that or not?
I believe that the displays in combat have backup records being made all the time so that they can do a post-combat analysis. So I'm going to guess that, the radar tracks have been recorded. Whether there's a bridge camera or not, I don't really recall. I wasn't looking for one at the time. I was just out there having fun and listening to the sea life party on the sonar. That was my favorite part of the ship. So I don't really know, but I imagine a lot of the data coming in from the sensor platforms is being, in fact, recorded and logged.
Hey, thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And again, if it makes the Navy look bad, you'll never see it. Now, a while back, there was this couple in Maryland who did something I thought was really disgusting. And they wanted to be YouTube stars, and they made this video playing this horribly cruel trick on their own children, and it went viral. And YouTube eventually took it down because viewers said this was abusive. They were abusing their children to get their time on YouTube. And apparently this Maryland couple are now in legal trouble, and they could face 10 years in prison, which means they're effectively going to lose their kids. Now, I know we all want to be stars, and we want to be famous, and we want our 15 minutes on YouTube and everything, but come on, people. Let's stick with the funny cat videos or something. Now, as I mentioned earlier in the show, we live in an age of scams. There are all kinds of scams going on, and there's a new one. Well, it's not a new one, but it's being resurgent. You'll get an email where somebody says, we're a law firm, we had a client with the same last name as you, they have died intestate, and you may be able to inherit part of their estate if we can verify your family lineage, blah, blah, blah. And it's an enticement to get you to come on in. They'll charge you money for whatever it is they're going to pretend to do, and then they'll come back and say, we're sorry, no, you don't qualify. But it's a scam. And there's all kinds of scams out there, and at this point, it almost seems like more than half the calls I get on my cell phone are a scam of some kind. And the government isn't interested in doing anything about it. I mean, they did take down one of the most abusive telemarketers out there. But the criminal scammers aren't even complying with the law or registering. They're using all kinds of cutouts. And it really is open season on the American people. So you got to be very, 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 very careful. And speaking of scams, Nestle is now facing a class action lawsuit because apparently their brand Poland Spring Water, which is out of Maine, is actually just regular old tap water. Believe it or not, the FDA has a legal definition of what constitutes spring water, and Nestle's Poland Spring Water does not come up to that. And so this class action lawsuit is seeking millions of dollars in damages. And I imagine that the water is perfectly okay to drink, but at the same time, we know Nestle's attitude. They think you should not have a right to water, that water should be owned and commoditized and you should pay for it. And this is clearly deceptive, misleading advertising, because people like to buy the spring water because they think that it is less likely to be polluted than groundwater. And yes, the bottled water companies do send their water through filters before it puts in the little plastic bottle, but those filters are not all inclusive. People do like the spring water because it is safer and better for you. And Nestle got caught. Now here's an interesting story. Paul Allen, sometimes his lifestyle can be excessive, but like James Cameron, he's putting a lot of his money into some very worthy projects, I think. And believe it or not, they finally succeeded in finding the remains of the USS Indianapolis. Now, for those of you who don't remember, it was mentioned briefly in the movie Jaws. The Indianapolis was the ship that delivered the components for the Hiroshima atomic bomb to Tinian. And on its way back from delivering the bomb, they were spotted by a Japanese submarine and torpedoed. And the ship went down, and it sank so fast they couldn't get a radio message out. Now, in the movie Jaws, they misstate it. They say the mission was so top secret they couldn't send a radio message. That wasn't it at all. The ship went down in like 2 minutes. They weren't able to get a message out. And something like 1,000 crew went into the ocean, and by the time they were spotted by a flying boat searching for them 3 days later, there were only a few hundred of them left. The sharks ate the rest. It was the worst shark disaster in recorded history, and that's the USS Indianapolis, and they finally found the ship itself in 18,000 feet of water. So they've located that historic landmark. Bad things happen in war. There's a lot of shipwrecks still down there. A lot of shipwrecks still down there, and some of them ought to be left alone. Some of them are carrying some very dangerous materials. We have areas around this island where a lot of very toxic materials were dumped after the end of World War II, and they're marked on the professional mariners' charts. No bottom net dragging here, no trawling here. Just don't come here. And they do monitor the water to see if anything's leaking. So far, so good, but you never really know. Actually, the remains of the Arizona are starting to leak rather large amounts of fuel into Pearl Harbor. Some days you can just see that rainbow glint on the water. You can even see it in Google Earth. They don't know what to do about it. The hull is so weak, if they try and drill in there to drain off the oil, the whole thing could collapse and let it all go at once. So it's one of those cases where we're just going to let it go. There's nothing we can do. All right, let's talk about human-caused global warming here. The media is still making a big deal every time they get a day that's over 100 degrees. Oh, my goodness, it's global warming. The temperature's over 100 degrees here. What they're not telling you is the number of times that they get these hot days in the Midwest is in decline. 100-degree days have become very, very rare in the Midwest, even as carbon dioxide continues to increase. We'll be back after these few. And aloha, welcome back to the show. We're talking about human-caused global warming. And let's see. They like to keep records of temperature data. And remember how NASA was saying that last year was the hottest year ever recorded? Well, okay. On August 21st, 1936, 21% of U.S. weather stations were over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, compared to just 2% on the same date last year. Yes, there are still days where the temperature is over 100. They're getting few and far between. Meanwhile, NASA has come out with a wonderful plan to head off the Yellowstone supervolcano eruption. And their idea is to literally drill down close to the magma chamber, a whole series of holes, and pump water down there to sort of like draw the heat out, to cool it off so it doesn't expand and explode. I would want to redo their calculations on that, because when you look at the heat density of magma versus the heat removing capability of water, it gets dicey. Basically, you could turn it into the world's largest geothermal power plant. And they tried to do that here on Hawaii, and that's actually what triggered the current Kilauea eruption. Very, very difficult to do. Can be done. Could be done. There's also the danger, if you start drilling down to that magma chamber, you could actually trigger an eruption. Supervolcanoes are not something that you should muck about with. In fact, there have been allegations that many years ago, the U.S. government tried to steer a volcanic eruption by blowing a hole in a side of a volcano facing away from civilization. And in the process of doing that, triggered an actual eruption. Okay, apparently the latest Bundy Ranch trial verdicts are in. Mostly are not guilty. And apparently John Stadmiller is going to be covering this in detail at the start of his show. So you're going to want to stay tuned for what's going on over there. Meanwhile, in Great Britain, now the liberal snowflakes want Nelson's column to be torn down. And Londoners are absolutely livid about that. And there was this interesting comment by one of the hosts reporting on the story saying, where do you stop with this desire to remold and reshape how we remember history based on your feelings? Because that is exactly what's going on. They want to remove the actual markers, the hard evidence of what history was, so they can come back and say, well, I feel that the history should have been this, and it should have been that. To rewrite history, to control the past in order to control the present. And it's a form of tyranny, plain and simple. That history does not belong to the power brokers. It belongs to all of us collectively because we and our ancestors lived it. We built it, we bled for it. We should not allow it to be tampered with or tinkered with by, as this broadcaster says, rewriting of history based on how you feel about it. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Again, a reminder, Stadmiller is going to have the latest on the Bundy Ranch trial verdicts. They're in, and looks like it may be good news for the most part. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.